Okay, so if you haven't already, please take out your chicken from your fridge because you generally when you cook chicken or you cook any kind of meat, you want to have it so that it's not, you want to let it sit at room temperature for a few minutes, for at least 15 or even up to a half hour, because that will influence the cooking time. It'll reduce the cooking time if you're not putting it in straight cold. But it's fine. If you just take it out right now, it's fine. Go ahead and turn your ovens on to 425. We'll preheat our ovens to 425 as we prep some of our other ingredients. And then that way, once we're finished prepping our dough, we can put our chicken in the oven. So I think what I'll have us do first is I'm going to have us take, we're going to have 2 cutting boards today. One cutting board is going to be dedicated to cutting vegetables, and the other cutting board we're going to use for rolling out our flatbread dough. So if I haven't actually said hello to everybody. Welcome everybody. Oh, hi Morgan. Hey, my brother's here. Hi Ganks. Oh, is Grayson napping? Hi Vanessa. Is Grayson? Grayson's there. Hi Grayson. Who are your friends? I see some friends there. Hi. Hello. It's good to see you. I'm Grayson's Auntie Lynna. Hi. You guys having a snack? Good. Okay. Oh, you're eating chips? Yeah, good.
Shrimp chips.
Corn chips? Shrimp chips. Shrimp chips. Nice. Okay, so we're going to chop our onion first. So pull out your chicken, have your oven preheating to 425. We're going to take our red onion. I have 2 red onions. Some of you are going to need more. So Corbin, you get chopping. I'm going to peel the red onion first. And as you see, I'm cutting off the ends first, just to make it easier to peel. And I'll do that for this onion here. This is a big red onion, but it'll be just fine. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut this into quarters. We're not going to chop them into tiny bits, but just cut them into quarters because they will kind of fall apart on their own as you mix it into your marinade. Okay, so here's one red onion I've peeled. I'll just leave it whole for now, and I'm going to peel my second one, cutting off the ends on both sides, and then peeling the skin off. And I want to let you know, if you ever feel like I'm going too quickly, you can tell me to slow down, or you can always shout out, and Clara can answer questions too. Hey, Winnie and Sabrina. I see you. Hi. Oh boy, we have more people joining. Hi. Hello. So Winnie, wait, hold on a second. Let me just I know Ginger's coming on, so let me get both of you on, and I'll repeat the instructions of where we're at. So if you haven't already, hi Ginger. All right. Hey Ginger. So if you guys, Winnie and Ginger, you just joined, if you haven't already, turn your ovens up to 425 to start preheating. Take your chicken out of the fridge if you haven't already. We've just peeled two red onions. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take these onions and I'm going to quarter them. I'm just going to stand it up on the flat end like that. I'm just going to quarter it. You could even maybe cut it into 6 if your onion is as big as mine, you can cut it into 6 if you want. But that's all you have to do. We're going to leave them in big chunks like this. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing with my second onion. Cut it in half and cut it into 6 or quarters, depending on the size of your onion. That's all. And I'm just going to throw this in with my chicken that's been marinating. I have my chicken here that I marinated with all of you this morning. And I'm going to just put the chicken in and take a pair of tongs and mix them in. I'm just going to just layer them, just kind of cover the onions with the chicken, just so that the onions can sit for a little bit in the sauce. Okay. All right. So just put it in. My bowl is overflowing, but that's okay because we're going to put this on a sheet tray in a little bit. So once you get your onions mixed in with your chicken, they don't have to be perfectly mixed in, but just kind of touching the marinade a little bit. Just set it aside. Keep your tongs with your chicken, your chickeny tongs, okay? And just set it aside. Cameron, you're probably crying right now because I'm teary too from chopping onions. All right.
My mom's still
so.
chopping.
Oh, you got your mom to do it? You cheater. Okay, that's fine. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to mix our dough. So grab a big bowl for your dough, a big empty bowl. I'm going to use this big glass bowl here, and grab your flour, your all-purpose flour, your whole wheat flour, and your baking powder and your yogurt. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to reach for is my whole wheat flour. I'm going to take a cup measure. I realized I did not grab a cup measure, but I'll do that now. I'll take my 1 cup measure and measure out. If you're just making one recipe, so if you're just making, say, 4 to 5, 425 is what the oven should be set at. If you're making just one recipe of, say, 4 to 5 flatbread, use just one recipe, one cup of whole wheat flour here. Otherwise, if you're going to double it or triple it, let me know. All right, so I'm making one recipe, so 4 to 5 flatbread. So I'm putting in 1 cup of whole wheat flour. Okay, and then I'm going to add 2/3 cup of all-purpose flour.
You know, if you keep helping me, you're gonna feel not as good as your date for your date night because you're gonna have.
Yeah, I won't have much like.
I'm going to put 2/3 cup of all-purpose flour. I'm not going to use another measuring cup. I'm just going to use my same 1 cup measure and just estimate about 2/3. Doesn't have to be perfectly exact. So I'm just going to put almost a cup in and then maybe take out 1/3 of a cup there. Yes, if you don't have whole wheat flour, you can use you can use all flour, just plain all-purpose flour for all of this too. I like the whole wheat flour because it adds like a nice texture to it and it adds some nice flavor. But if you don't have the whole wheat flour, you can just do straight 1 cup of 1 2/3 cup of regular flour. Okay, so I have my whole wheat flour and my all-purpose flour in here. The next thing I'm going to add is 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Of kosher salt.
Flour again?
How much, what kind of flour?
All-purpose.
Oh, if you're just making one recipe, 2/3 cup of all-purpose flour. Okay, so I'm measuring out about 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt. 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt with your 1 cup of whole wheat flour and 2/3 cup of all-purpose flour. The reason I'm not having you use all all-purpose flour, all whole wheat flour is that it can make the dough not quite as soft and easy to kind of to roll out. So that's why we're mixing it with a little bit of regular flour. And then the next ingredient we're going to add is some baking powder. So Clara, if you want, you can type this into the chat. These are the ingredients we used. What did I say? 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. Okay, there we go. Okay, so Clara's going to put all the ingredients for the flatbread dough into the chat. So in case you missed it, you'll see it right there. And I'm going to take you can take a whisk or a wooden spatula, rubber spatula, and just mix it together, just so that the flours and the baking powder and the salt get mixed in. Make sure you're using baking powder, not baking soda. They have very different properties when you're baking. I made the mistake once of adding baking soda instead of baking powder into a huge batch of banana bread I was making at Bake Sale Betty, and I ruined 24 loaves of banana bread. Did not turn out. Okay, so I've mixed together my dry ingredients here, my flour and my salt and baking powder. And the next thing I'm going to add is yogurt. I'm going to add 1 cup of whole milk yogurt. So just add it in after you've mixed in all the dry ingredients. I'm just going to eyeball what 1 cup looks like to me. The reason we're making this dough first is we're not only waiting for our oven to preheat, but we're also it'll allow the dough ingredients to kind of meld together. The flour molecules can absorb the yogurt molecules, and they can kind of rest and become easier to work with later. Okay, so I have about a cup of whole milk yogurt. I'll add a little bit more. There. Okay. Go ahead and once your yogurt's all mixed together. Oh, hello. We have some late arrivals. Hey, Al. Hi. What do you need to know? Let us know if you need us to catch you up. We are just, so what we've done so far, Al, is we've taken the chicken out. We've preheated our oven to 425. We've peeled and quartered 2 red onions and added it to your chicken. And that's just sitting there. And now we're in the midst of making our flatbread dough, which is going to rest for a little while we make the rest of our dinner.
Great, thank you.
Clara put the ingredients of the flatbread dough into. Okay, Clara's about to put in the ingredients into the chat.
Perfect.
For the flatbread dough.
Thank you.
All right. Any questions? So I'm just taking a rubber spatula and mixing the yogurt into our dry ingredients of our flatbread. It'll come together pretty easily. You don't have to get your hands dirty, luckily. You can just use a rubber spatula. It'll all come together.
Lynna,
yep.
The yogurt, we put in 1 cup, and it seems like it's not combining.
Just keep mixing.
Okay.
It doesn't look very wet at all.
Okay. Keep mixing for a little bit. I know the whole wheat dough, the whole wheat flour can sometimes make it seem harder. If it's still not coming together, you can go ahead and add a little bit more yogurt. Mine's looking pretty ragged too, but I'm going to keep mixing for a little longer. Okay, so yeah, Ginger, I'm encountering the same issue. So I'm just going to add some more, so a little bit more yogurt. If you'd like, you can also add a little water, but I think it'll also kind of start to come together more as it rests. So I'll add a tad bit of water, maybe like a tablespoon of water. Sometimes depending on the humidity of where you're at too, it can come together more or less easier. Okay, there. So I added a tiny bit of water, and that's kind of making it come together a little bit more. Okay. So now that the dough is kind of roughly coming together into a ball, I'm going to use my hands and just scrape off what's on my spatula. And then I might just take my hands and just kind of press in the last bits here. We'll knead it a little bit more in a little bit, but let's just let it rest here. How's your dough looking, Owen and Ginger? Oh, good. Did it come together finally?
Yeah.
Came together? Okay.
Water helped a lot.
Oh, good. Okay. This is not an exact recipe, luckily. It's not like a cake, or certain cakes and pastries require much more exacting measurements. This is just flatbread, which is very forgiving. All right, so I have my dough here, and it's kind of in a ball. I'm gonna go grab a clean towel, and I'm just gonna cover it. Grab a clean towel and just put it over your bowl of dough, and we're just gonna set this aside and let it rest, just like that. Okay, so put this over here. All right, how's it going? I see some people still working. So as you're putting your dough together and getting it ready to rest, I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do next, but I'm not gonna do it yet because I'll wait till everyone has a chance to catch up. We're gonna start placing our chicken and our onions onto our sheet tray. Right, so let's, we'll just wait for a little bit for people to catch up. I'm gonna make my way over to my chicken and start placing the chicken with my tongs onto the sheet tray. So let's just show. That's good. Huh? So now that your chicken has been marinating for a few hours, we're gonna lay it out on your sheet tray. Try to flatten out your chicken pieces so that they cook evenly. And I have them kind of, it's okay if they're touching, okay? And I'm gonna leave my onions in there first so that I can give my onions one last bath in the marinade before I lay it out all over the chicken. I have my chicken thighs that I'm laying out.
Hey, Lynna, is that parchment paper you have on the tray, or what's that?
I put parchment paper, but you can put foil.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I have my chicken, my chicken down on my tray, and I'm gonna spread them out. So again, make sure your chicken is in one layer. If your chicken pieces, they can be touching, but make sure your chicken pieces are able to fit in one layer. If not, you might need to grab a second sheet tray, especially if you're like Corbin or others doubling or tripling the recipe. And then I'm just taking the onions that we quartered or cut into chunks, and I'm just gonna kind of break them up a little bit with my tongs and lay them all over the chicken like that. And before I do, I'm just kind of tossing it into the marinade. Yeah?
If I'm doing the mushroom, I've never cooked portobello for Alice before. Do I lay the mushrooms down like a cup, or like which direction?
Either way, Alice, Molly, because we're going to flip them halfway.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I have all this, leftover marinade. I'm just kind of swishing my onions in them. And then I'm just gonna lay my onions, just scatter them over the chicken. And some of my chicken, my onion pieces are quite big, so I'm just gonna take my tongs and break them apart a little bit. What happens is that the chicken will broil with the onions. Question?
Lynna? Pour the extra marinade on top or no?
I wouldn't, no, you don't need to.
Okay.
Only because we don't want it to be too wet. But just make sure all of your onion pieces get to sit, take a little bath in the marinade. So I actually don't have a ton of marinade left in mine. Okay. So the more you break up your onions, the more surface area you'll have that will get to brown. and get kind of crisp, crunchy, kind of a little bit charred as you roast your chicken. So I'm just gonna break out these chunks into smaller pieces. I'm just using my tongs so I don't get my hands dirty, but if you have to get your hands dirty, it's fine. I'm just gonna scatter them all over. All right. Good, so here's what my tray looks like. I have my chicken down in one layer, and I have my onions scattered all over. And the onions have all had a chance to take a bath in the marinade. All right. And then my oven's just about ready at 425, so I'm just gonna go ahead and throw this into the oven. And I'll set a timer for 15 minutes. The chicken is gonna cook for a total of about 30 to 40 minutes. And I'm gonna check them halfway through and kind of flip them a little bit. So I'm gonna set a timer for 15 minutes and check on my chicken, and then reset the timer for another 15 minutes after that. So they'll cook for a total of 30 to 40 minutes, okay? All right. And I have my oven rack set at the like the middle to top third of the oven. If your hands have accidentally touched the marinade, make sure you wash your hands with soap. I know sometimes the chicken marinade can kind of splash around. You want to make sure that anything that has touched raw chicken gets either wiped down or washed. And if your hands too, make sure you wipe it down also. So I just have some chicken marinade. I'm gonna just wipe off the counter here. Okay. Hey Google, set a timer for 15 minutes. How sticky should the dough be? Let's take a look. Okay. So Shmoo is asking, it's in a ball. It shouldn't be, we're gonna be rolling it out in a little bit. So it can be somewhat sticky, but it's not really sticking. The dough is not really sticking to my hands. Does that make sense? So it's just a ball. It's slightly wet, it's a little moist. And later when we roll it out, we're gonna put more flour down on our cutting board. So it'll dry out a little bit more. And I just put my chicken into the oven. Yes, I just put it in. I set my timer for 15 minutes. But let's let our dough rest for a little longer. Okay, and I'm going to now, using the same cutting board I used to cut up my onion, I'm going to just take some time to cut up my parsley, and my onions and cucumbers. So we're just gonna cut up our vegetables right now. So I think the first thing I'll cut is our cucumber, and then I'll cut the parsley, and then I'll cut the tomato. So let me grab my Persian cucumbers that have been washed.
Lynna,
Yep.
in the recipe, you didn't say how much Italian parsley we're going to use, so I just got...
about, how much did you get, Shameme?
Well, we don't have that much. We have just this.
You just, oh, perfect. Use all of that.
Okay.
That's fine. Use all of it. Just chop it all up. We're just going to use this to kind of sprinkle over your chicken. And if you happen to have any leftover parsley, you can also just add this to your flatbread sandwiches later too, to your chicken. Some people like to have whole pieces of herbs, and it's actually really pretty. Some people like to have whole pieces of herbs added to their wrap, and you can do that with parsley for sure if you like the flavor of parsley. So I'm just taking the leaves off of my parsley stems, and enough for us to have a healthy handful, like maybe a good 2 tablespoons of chopped parsley. So, oops, sorry, I actually said we're gonna do cucumber first. Either way, it's fine. We can do parsley first too.
How should we cut our cucumbers?
Cucumbers will be cut into little dice. Okay, so what, Mimi? If your dough is a little sticky, don't worry about it because we'll add more flour to it as when we roll it out. We'll work on it together. Okay, so I have a big handful of parsley here. If those of you who want to cut your cucumber first, you can. I'll show you how I'm going to cut my cucumber. I have these Persian cucumbers here. This is actually my favorite kind of cucumber to eat raw because the skin is really thin and the seeds are really small and delicate, and you can barely even tell that they're there. They're really soft and practically transparent. They're not like other types of cucumbers where the seeds are bigger. These are very soft, really mild seeds. So this way we don't have to remove the seeds. So I just cut my cucumber in half, and I'm just going to cut these into strips. And this is just, you want to cut them into small dice so that they're small enough to just add to your wrap. So I have mine, I'm just chopping mine into these like maybe 1/2 inch little triangles. They don't have to all be perfect, but just like that. And these are going to go into for people to be able to assemble their wrap. And I'm going to put all my cut cucumber into one bowl. And this way people who don't like cucumber can avoid them. This way people can assemble their own wraps. So I have another Persian cucumber question.
For the parsley, are we going to cut it any, or are we just going to leave the leaves whole?
You can do either. I'm going to mince mine, but you can also leave your leaves whole, Shamime, if you don't mind eating them whole in your wrap. I'm just cutting my cucumber this way into little dice, like 1/2 inch dice. Okay. And use as much or as little cucumber as you feel like your family will eat tonight. And after I'm done cutting my cucumber, I'll mince my parsley. So once you're done cutting cucumber, just set them aside in a bowl. And this is done. This can just go straight to your table. You're done with the cucumber. We're not going to need to season it or anything because we want them to stay crunchy and pretty plain, because later on we're going to have plenty of flavor from the chicken and our yogurt tahini sauce. All right, so now I have my handful of parsley here. I'm just going to take my parsley and gather them into a ball, and that makes it easier for me to mince. So rather than having all your parsley scattered all over your cutting board, I just gather my parsley into a ball and then cut it up that way. It'll still kind of get loosen up and fall apart, but once they're gathered together, it makes it easier to mince. You don't have to mince them super tiny because this is just going to be what we're going to scatter over our chicken when we serve. It does add flavor, but it adds color too. And if you don't mind having your parsley in, in the whole entire as leaves, you can also just leave them whole. You don't have to cut them. And if you have other herbs, I didn't mention this in my email, but if you also have other herbs in your garden like dill or cilantro, you can also add this to your flatbread too. Okay, so I just have my parsley that I've kind of chopped roughly, and I have it in my little ramekin. we'll set this aside for scattering over our chicken. And the last thing I'm going to cut up is my tomatoes. So I have 4 tomatoes here. I'm going to cut them in half and cut the stems off. Tomatoes are, believe it or not, you can still find really good tomatoes in the store right now. These are still early girls. I'm gonna milk every last opportunity I can to cook with these. Make sure you examine your tomatoes for any bruises or holes. Cutting the stems out. And then I'm just gonna chop these too. You need a pretty sharp knife to chop tomatoes. Sometimes if your knife isn't that sharp, it makes it easier if you use a serrated knife. But believe it or not, the easiest way to cut yourself is to have a dull knife. So try as much as possible to keep your knives as sharp as possible. As I mentioned in my, and again, I'm just chopping my onions. I'm sorry, my tomatoes. As I mentioned this morning, I think what I'll do one of these days is do a little kitchen tour of my favorite essential kitchen tools. Like essential and nice to have ones, because the holidays are coming and might be a good opportunity to add some items to your kitchen if you don't have them already. And nothing will be too expensive. Everything is just something you could probably buy for under, I don't know, like under $15 maybe. I think the one thing you really want to have really want to invest in are really, good kitchen knives and good cutting board, good solid cutting board, because you'll use those over and over, right? If you've noticed, those are the 2 things that without fail we always use on our Sundays when we cook together, is a cutting board and a chef's knife. Those will cost more than $15, but you will use it for the rest of your life. You can take it with you when you go to college. This kitchen knife, David and I got when we were married almost 20 years ago, and this will last us for a lifetime. Okay. So I have my tomatoes cut right here. I have one more tomato here. I think I'll leave this because I think that's enough tomato for our family tonight. So I have cut up my cucumber, cut up my tomato, cut up my parsley. Right. And while I have this cutting board out, because I think this is the last thing we need with our vegetable cutting board, I'm going to, and I'll do this slowly because we have plenty of time if you need to catch up. I'm going to just peel 1 clove of garlic. I'm going to get this clove of garlic ready for our tahini sauce. So if you have a microplane, you can grab your microplane and we can just shave or grate our garlic into the sauce. But if you don't have a microplane, take this opportunity to mince your garlic as tiny as possible, because this is for a sauce that we'll be using, and you probably don't want to have huge chunks of garlic in your sauce. So try to use either a microplane if you have it, or just mince them as finely as possible, or a garlic press could work too if you have a garlic press. But take this opportunity now that you have our vegetable cutting board out to mince your garlic. So I'm going to take my microplane and mince my garlic. Take your time. We have plenty of time. I'm just grating my garlic into the bowl I'm going to be using for our yogurt-tahini sauce, taking advantage of having this cutting board out already if you're mincing. right. How's everyone doing? All right. Cool. Okay. So if you're all caught up, I see some of you ready for the next step. We're going to make our yogurt tahini sauce. So our yogurt tahini sauce, which we already started, if you haven't already, you can grate some garlic into a bowl, a medium-sized bowl. It's about this size. And while you have your vegetable cutting board out, go ahead and cut half a lemon, or cut a lemon in half. I still have my lemon left over from this afternoon or this morning when I was using lemon from my marinade. So I have this half a lemon left over here. I'm gonna grate the zest off. You don't have to, but as I said this morning, I love to use every bit of this lemon. And if you really like the taste of lemon, you can go ahead and zest some of this lemon and add it to your yogurt tahini sauce. You don't have to. But what you will need is you need about 2 tablespoons of lemon juice for this yogurt tahini sauce. So before I juice it, I'm just gonna take some of the zest off. Hey Google, stop. So there went the timer for my halfway point for my chicken. So I'm gonna go ahead and check it and just make sure no parts of it are burning or cooking too fast. So I'm grabbing my tongs that I used earlier, and I'm gonna take the chicken out and just check it. And I'm gonna see if I need to flip it, which I think I will. So I see my chicken here. I can see some of the chicken is starting, some of the onions are starting to kind of get charred. So I'm just gonna take those pieces and turn them over so that other parts of the onion can get charred too. So here I have my tray of chicken, and I'm gonna flip my chicken also while I'm at it, just so that it can cook more evenly. Okay. If you have any onion that's getting charred, just try to turn them so that they're facing downwards so that another part of the onion can get charred. These charred onions are one of my favorite parts of this dish. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna put this back in the oven after I flipped all my chicken and moved my onions around. I'm gonna put it in for another 15 minutes. Hey Google, set a timer for 15 minutes. 15 minutes. All right. So once you've checked your chicken and flipped the pieces or your mushrooms. No, you can leave the liquid on the tray. That'll evaporate off, and we'll just leave that behind when we take our chicken out. Okay, so back to our yogurt tahini sauce. I have a kind of a smallish medium bowl that I will be mixing my yogurt and tahini in. Inside this bowl, I have some grated garlic, just 1 clove. You can mince it too if you don't have a microplane or you don't have a garlic press. But I want it as tiny as possible. I want it to really kind of melt into this sauce. And to this, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. So I have my lemon from this morning, but you might have to cut open a lemon. There we go. So add your lemon juice to your garlic. The lemon zest is optional, but if you really like the taste of lemon, I think it adds a lot of freshness. Okay, so I have about 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. And the next thing we're going to add is our yogurt. So we're going to add 2/3 of a cup of yogurt. I'm just going to eyeball what I think is about 2/3 cup. So I'm going to just pour in 1/3, 2/3 of yogurt. Okay, mix it. And next thing I'm going to add to my lemon juice, garlic, and yogurt is the tahini paste. And for those of you who cooked with me back in July, we made a salmon dish, the pomegranate molasses salmon with hummus. And you might still have some tahini left over, so I wanted to give you another opportunity to use the tahini. So go ahead and add in 3 tablespoons of tahini paste. This is the kind I use. So you might need to shake it up a little bit or take a spoon and kind of mix it, because tahini, when it's natural in its natural state, can separate from the oil from the solids. So you just want to shake it or mix it together and then take out 3 tablespoons. So I'm just going to eyeball it. 1, 2, 3. And tahini paste is sesame seeds that have been ground up.
Lynna,
Kind of like peanut butter.
when you put your chicken or your mushrooms back in, how long do you put it for?
I put mine in for another 15 minutes. Because the chicken's going to cook for a total of about 30 to 40 minutes. We'll check it together. Some of you might be done after 30 minutes. Some of you might be done after 40 minutes. Depends on the heat of your oven, how thick your chicken thighs were. The mushrooms will definitely be done after 30 minutes, maybe even like 10 minutes. Okay, so go ahead and add in your tahini paste to your yogurt and garlic and lemon juice. And then I'm also going to throw in 3 tablespoons of tahini. And then Clara's going to put into the chat the ingredients for the amounts of the ingredients for everything. I'm also now going to add some salt. I'm going to add about half a teaspoon of salt, just again eyeballing it, and then just mixing it together. This sauce is so good. It'll just let it marinate, let it kind of sit for a little bit together. But what you'll do is you'll drizzle it over your flatbread, and you can actually use this to dip all kinds of things, like lots of different types of meats and roasted vegetables. It's a really nice dipping sauce. I'm just gonna dip it. Grab a tasting spoon if you have it and taste it for salt and tartness. I used about half a teaspoon of salt, kosher salt. You want it to taste like yogurt, so it should be tangy, but you also want to be able to taste the tahini paste and the garlic and the lemon. If you feel like it needs anything, feel free to add it. If you want it to be tangier, you can add more yogurt or more lemon. But this tastes just about right. The consistency should be like, kind of like yogurt. It's thick. It's, you know, you want it to be something that you can drizzle. So it should be pretty liquidy here. Let me show you what's a good, let me put it on me. This is kind of something you can dollop. So this is the consistency of mine. That. All right, and this is done. You can also, you know, jazz it up if you want to add cumin to it, if you want to add some black pepper to it, but I like it just as is. So I'm just going to set this aside. This is ready to go on your table to serve. Okay, so I have our vegetable cutting board here. We're still going to use this, and we're going to use this cutting board to cut up our chicken. So set this aside for now. We're going to reuse this cutting board in a little bit. But what I want you to do next is get a clean cutting board so we can roll out our dough. Now that our dough has had a chance to rest, it's ready to roll out. You want to make sure you still have some all-purpose flour handy nearby. And by the way, now that you know how to make this sauce, if you like it, you can, if you still have lots of tahini left over, you can keep making this sauce for other purposes. Okay, so I have my ball of dough. I'm going to grab my all-purpose flour, and I'm going to just dust my cutting board here. Let me just put this aside. I'm going to take a handful, and make sure your hands are dry too. So wipe your hands on a towel if your hands are a little damp, and then grab a handful of flour and just kind of sprinkle it all over your cutting board. And if you have residual flour on your hands, perfect, because what you'll be using is you'll be using it to grab your dough to place it on your little layer of flour here on your cutting board. So the dough should be pretty soft, okay? And it should be easy to handle. It should be all kind of sticking together. The flour molecules have had a chance to absorb the liquid from the yogurt. And I'm just gonna knead it. So I'll show you what I mean by kneading it. Knead is K-N-E-A-D, knead. I have it in a bowl, in a ball right now. And I'm gonna use kind of I have my hands here, my palms. I'm gonna use this, like this meaty, fleshy part of the bottom of my hand, my palm, to use it as a way to kind of press into the dough and knead it, just like this. See that? Okay. I'm just kneading it. I'm just folding a piece of dough into the middle and taking my hands and kneading it and pressing it down. And as kneaded, kneaded, N-E-E-D-E-D. I love the puns. I'm just getting my hands full of flour so that the dough doesn't stick to my hands. Like that. So I'll do it slowly. I'm just bringing the dough, kind of folding it over itself. And so that kind of trying to keep it into a ball. I'm trying to keep just kneading it smooth, just so that all of the flour has a chance to settle in with the yogurt molecules. Okay, so I still have a ball, smooth, relatively, it's okay. I'm gonna grab a knife. See, you can just use your knife that you were using before. I'm gonna cut this ball into fourths, like that. And if you're using, if you're making like a double recipe, this part might take you a little longer. So I'm gonna set aside all but one piece of dough. And I have a little wedge of dough here. And make sure your cutting board, again, has a fine layer of flour on it. Make sure there's plenty of flour nearby for you to be able to put your hands in it and keep your hands full of flour. I'm gonna take my rolling pin, my wooden rolling pin here. If you don't have a rolling pin, you can use a wine bottle, but be very careful. And I'm gonna take a little bit of flour and I'm just gonna rub it all over my rolling pin like this, just so that it has a fine layer of flour. And I'm going to roll out this dough, just like that. Okay. So I'll show you how I'm doing it here. Okay. All right. So my my flatbread, I'm going to roll to a thickness of about 1/8 of an inch. It does not have to be perfectly round. What's lovely about flatbread is that you're going to be rolling it up and covering it with chicken and mushrooms and vegetables and herbs. So it doesn't have to be perfectly round, but you want it to be roughly the diameter of, I don't know, like a cereal bowl, maybe, like a little mini pizza, like a mini pizza. And the way I'm rolling it out is I'm starting from the middle and radiating out and turning it, radiating out, just like that. That way it looks kind of circular. And it's about 1/8 of an inch. It's pretty thin, just like that. Okay, so that's one flatbread dough rolled out. And now that I have one flatbread dough rolled out, I'm going to turn to my stove and turn my cast iron pan up to about a medium high. And I don't have any oil. I'm just using a dry, flat cast iron pan. Okay, so I'm turning it to a medium high. I'm just going to let it heat up. Any questions? Everyone's working. I see everyone's hands rolling out dough. Hi, Annie. This is so great, you guys all working with your rolling pins, working with flour. I'm just hanging out, waiting for everybody to kind of catch up. We're like 3/4 of the way done. We're actually more than that even. We're probably 85% done. Corbin, how are you? Do you have helpers with you with your triple recipe? Good, okay. I was afraid you'd be on your own making dinner for all of you. Okay, so the flatbread should be about 1/8 of an inch thick, pretty thin. Not like paper thin, but thin enough that you know, that it'll still stand up to putting a filling inside. All right, so my pan my cast iron pan that I've heated to about medium high is about ready for me to put my flatbread onto. There's no oil in the pan. It's just a dry cast iron pan. If you don't have a cast iron pan, I think a nonstick pan would be your next best option. And my timer for my chicken is about to go off. So once my timer goes off, I'm gonna carefully place my flatbread into my hot pan, and I'm going to check on my chicken. There goes the timer. Stop. All right, so my cast iron pan, make sure it's hot before you put in your flatbread. And I'm just gonna very carefully slide one in. I'm just gonna let it sit there for about 2 minutes. And I'm gonna check my chicken right now. Okay, so, chicken's looking almost done. I'd say it's probably there. I did some research and learned, as I've learned with Ginger's told me in the past, cooked chicken is 165. That's the temperature you want for cooked chicken. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it in for another maybe 5 minutes, because I really like my onions to be as charred as possible. So, and my chicken thighs are very forgiving. So I'm just gonna put it in for another 5 minutes. Hey Google, set a timer for 5 minutes.
5 minutes, and we're starting now.
All right. So as my flatbread, my first flatbread is cooking on the cast iron pan, I'm going to roll out my second one, but you may already have rolled out all of yours already. And again, when I roll out my flatbread dough, I start from the middle and radiate out, and I rotate my dough as I'm doing it so that it becomes circular. It doesn't have to be perfectly circular, but just relatively round. About 1/8 of an inch thick. And the thing that's lovely about this recipe too, it's so full of flavor, and everyone can assemble it as they want. People can make their own. They can put as much or as little sauce as they want. They can put all the vegetables that they want. If they don't like parsley, they don't have to add the parsley. And so my flatbread dough, I'm going to check now. I've had it in there for almost 2 minutes. I'm going to take a clean pair of tongs. I'm going to just check the bottom of it. Maybe check it. And I want it to be a little bit charred in some spots. This is not charred enough for me, so I'm going to put it in have it sit there for another, 45 seconds or so while I roll out the rest of my dough. But you do want some charred spots for your flatbread because that'll make it taste good. Not too burnt, but just some charred spots. And make sure you add enough flour on your cutting board so that your dough doesn't stick to the board as you roll it out. Make sure your hands are floury too. It's also okay if your flatbread dough is different sized. Some people in your family they can choose whether they want a bigger one or a littler one. I'm gonna pick up my flatbread there. This is about the right amount of char I want it. You can see here it's dark brown in a couple spots. Okay, so that was probably about 3 minutes on that one side. And you want to do this to each of your flatbread. I know it's a little slow. My pan is only big enough for one at a time, so it's a little slow going, but luckily each one cooks in about 3 to 4 minutes. So I'm going to grab a platter that I'm going to have ready for my flatbread. And then you can take that, as you take the flatbread off, you can put that clean towel that you use to cover your flatbread dough. You can also use it to cover the flatbread to keep it warm. Your flatbread might puff up a little bit. That's fine. It'll deflate as it rests. And this first flatbread is done. It's a little bit charred on both sides. And again, it's thin so that it cooks quickly. I'm going to put in my second one and just keep an eye on it. And my chicken's about ready to come out in about a minute. So we'll take that out shortly. If you're done rolling out your dough and you're just kind of waiting for your flatbread to cook each one, you can start also kind of cleaning up your workspace. So putting, things that you don't need anymore into the sink. You do want to keep your cutting board, your first cutting board, the vegetable cutting board, out, because I'm going to ask you to take it out again in a little bit to cut up chicken. Okay. All right. So my timer is about to go off on my chicken. Hey, Google, stop. Okay. So I'm going to take my chicken out of the oven. And again, make sure that your onions are slightly charred. Eric, some of the edges should be slightly charred. Here's what mine looks like. Make sure. See here. Okay. So I'm just gonna let this sit here for a few minutes to let it rest and to let it cool down a little bit, because what you want is to be able to handle it later. We're gonna cut up the chicken to make it easier to serve. So if you're still waiting for your flatbread, you can start cleaning up your workspace. Make sure you keep an eye on your flatbread. I'm gonna flip mine. I have one side that's charred, so I'm gonna flip it over and let it sit for another minute. And I'm gonna clean up the ingredients that the kitchen equipment I don't need anymore, just to get a head start on cleaning later. I'm gonna put bowls that I don't need into the sink. If your heat is getting too hot for your flatbread, you can turn it down a little bit if it's starting to burn too quickly. If you're done with your rolling pin, you can also put it into the sink. You're ready to, you don't need that anymore. This way it makes it easier to clean up after dinner. Your flour and your baking powder can be put away. All right. Everyone, make sure your chicken is out of the oven. Okay, and I'm going to show you what I'm doing with my chicken next. So I'm going to move aside my cutting board that I had my dough on. I'm bringing back my cutting board that we cut our vegetables on. It's okay that it has some residual tomato juice on it. I'll just wipe it off. But I'm all about efficiency and not having to clean more than you need to. So this way you have fewer dishes to deal with later. This way we're not having to use a third cutting board. So I'm going to bring my chicken over, and a platter that you're going to serve your chicken on, have that next to you too. Don't forget to check on your flatbread. We're multitasking here. But I think this is the fun part, and everything all starts to come together. Okay, grab a clean pair of tongs. You can use the tongs that you were using for your flatbread, actually. I'm gonna flip my flatbread. Okay, and I'm gonna there. Sorry about that. Maybe it's still on it. I'm gonna put it on me. I'm gonna carefully lay my place my chicken thigh onto the cutting board, and I'm just gonna cut it into strips. So you can stack them or you can slice them one by one. But I'm just gonna slice these into strips that people can easily place in their flatbread. The thickness is, I would say, it's about maybe 1/4 inch thick. Just like that. Okay, and same with your portobello mushrooms, if you're doing portobello mushrooms. So I'm just going to place, let me just make room for you to see my platter too. So I'm just cutting up my chicken and placing it into my platter. I'm using tongs so I don't get my hands dirty and because the chicken's hot. There we go. Suggest cutting up all your chicken, even if you don't think you'll eat it all tonight, because that'll save you from having to cut it up again tomorrow. And you can just serve it from, if you have leftovers, you can just serve it straight from your serving bowl. And you can see the onions are beautifully flavored. They look really flavorful. Cutting up the chicken, it's pretty juicy. Try to capture some of these juices onto the chicken. I'm just scraping it up with my knife. And, oh, and I'm not going to forget my flatbread. I have one more there. I have one more flatbread to, there we go. Back to my chicken. All right. And then once you've finished cutting up your chicken, you can, if you'd like, you can pour some of the juices from the chicken, from the sheet pan all over your chicken, but don't forget to add the onions too. The onions add color and flavor. That.
Lynna,
Uh-huh.
for the portobello mushrooms, do you also cut them into strips like that?
Yes. Yes. Yep. You can cut the mushrooms into strips too. That'll make it easier to serve and to eat. So I have my onions all over, and I'm gonna pour some of the liquid left on my sheet pan. There's some like yummy chunks of garlic. If you like that, you can add that too. To me, it's just all flavor. Just gonna add it all over, drizzle it all over the chicken and the onions. And the last thing to, again, give it color and flavor is we're gonna add our chopped parsley. Okay. Again, I'm gonna just carefully place my, trying to clean as I go. I'm gonna add my chopped parsley all over my chicken. That. This is ready for the table. Checking on my flatbread. So you have your cucumbers, your tomatoes, more parsley if you have some that you want to serve, and your tahini and yogurt sauce. And your flatbread. How's everyone doing? I see a lot of movement. I see people wrapping up their flatbread. Don't forget to turn your stove off, your pan off, your oven off.